Rustios, 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 Minios, Rusty-A, Rustios, 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 Minios, Rusty-A, Rustios, 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 Minios, Rusty-A.
Today we're going to start rather smooth by removing the vehicle from its comfortable yet slightly cold garagey abode to remove its pleasure flakes from the floor with a lovely soft brush. Then we're going to slowly spin it around so we can get really feng shui in the area. You've got to think about the wellness of your car now. And then we're going to give it a nice douse down, get in all those cracks. Ooh, lovely, nice and clean now. Keep on cleaning, go on.
I'm not completely sure why I did that because it's going to get absolutely filthy by the end of this video, but it's the thought that counts, right? Anyway, in the first video we disassembled the car and did some welding in the front of the vehicle. In the second video we got it up on this rotisserie chicken jig and focused on the back of the vehicle. Now in this video we're going to focus on the middle of it, this bit right here. So this bit, as you can see, sounds pretty good. Now I know some of you might think this might be the best condition an underside of a vehicle could ever look, but if you look closer, you'll see it's a little bit, just a tiny bit rusty. See? For starters, some of this floor is very high tech. It is actually invisible. Harry Potter has had a good old go on it. And other parts have very advanced metallic properties like this. It's very wobbly. Luckily, thanks to decades of oil leaks where the engine was and behind it, that's solid. Yeah. The tunnel where the gear stick and the exhaust went is pretty good. There are a couple of crummy bits here and there. Oh, there's a hole there. Oh, there's a hole there. Ooh. But for the most part, it's pretty good. But if you start veering to any of the edges, it doesn't even put up a fight against the screwdriver. Look at that. In fact, I think I might even be able to pull this off by hand. I can. Look at that. Lovely. In fact, I don't even think I'm going to need an angle grinder to get this panel off the car. Wait. Oh, here we go. Kablammy. There we go. And the other side is exactly the same. So evidently something needs to be done about this or this car is not getting back on the road. Amazingly enough, there isn't much left of some of these panels. There's even a couple of aftermarket additions like this bit of metal and this bit of metal, which were probably repairs to get past the MOT, which is fair enough. Looking on the inside, even the cross member has holes and rusted seams, and yeah, it's not complete. Every panel in the floor assembly has at least one hole in it. Now this part of the job has the potential to take absolutely blooming ages to do. Maybe a week of faffing, maybe even more. You could get a full replacement floor panel on this side, a full replacement floor panel on that side, a heel board at the back, do some patching on the central tunnel, and also get some repair pieces for the cross member. Or you can maybe get this all done in about a day and cut the amount of grinding and welding to about 25%. How is this possible? Well, I wasn't looking forward to this part of the job whatsoever until I found this. Oh, the blooming neck. Oh, jeez. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, you've got it right. It's a completely assembled floor for a Mini Traveller. This is a serious piece of metal. In fact, it's acting like a plate reverb. One sec. Ooh, yeah. Ooh, yeah, ooh, yeah, ooh, yeah. Boogie, woogie, ooh, doo, doo, doo. So this is all of the repair panels that you need to replace a whole floor on a Mini Traveller, but all already welded together. This includes the outer sills, the floor pans, including the inner sills, the heel board, the cross member, the handbrake mount, and also the tunnel, already all welded together. In theory, we'll get this all done in a day, but first we need to get this out of the way because we need to do all of the bits on the Mini before we can plonk this on top. Fingers crossed. Now, you may or may not have seen a video from a few months ago of us getting GemFinder's supercomputer back up and running. Well, in order to do that, we somewhat shrunk it in size, so I'm actually left with a load of these steel bars. So we're going to use these to build a frame inside the car.
We're going to start by putting on some safety goggles because apparently safety squints are not sufficient for YouTube viewership, which is fair enough. But we're going to put a few bits of frame here, a few bits of frame there. I didn't do this in a rigorous manner. I just kind of looked at it and eyed it up. As you can see, that was not matching up, so I just went, oh, screw it, it'll do. I'm going to be chopping it off, hopefully in a few hours. But spoiler alert, it really wasn't a few hours. It took a couple of days to do this whole job in the end.
So I've added a bunch of bars. They're all connected together in a sort of crisscross sort of fashion. I figured it doesn't need to be pretty, but I think that's going to be enough. So I think we could start cutting. So it begins. Oh yeah, I've been waiting for this moment.
Right, so now it's time to just start cutting. I was cutting it up bit by bit because I wasn't really sure what to do. In hindsight, now I know what I'm doing. I would have probably done it all at once, which might have sped it up and saved about 10 grinding discs. But I decided to do it all bit by bit, as you can see, just methodically, just to see how it went together in the first place. And yeah, I started getting really nervous about it. It felt like it was all flopping everywhere, so I kept on adding more bars, and the more I removed, the more bars I added. But yeah, this is all coming apart as you would expect in a really rusty, hazy fashion. And then I ended up with the mini crucifix that you saw in the intro. The bits around the edges are of course the most time-consuming things because these are the bits that are connected to bits of metal that we want to save. So it's about methodically removing it without damaging the other bits of metal that we're trying to not damage that goes around it, including this bit at the back, which is the heel board. We can't overcut this or we end up cutting into pieces that we shouldn't be cutting, and then we end up with a car that's all mishmashed and looks like a wonky donkey, which is not what we want.
So with the repairs that we've just done, we should be able to weld the heel board to the back and the front of the floor to the toe board. Also, we will be able to attach the passenger side seam. The driver's side seam is still rusty. That's because this repair panel has spent the last 2 weeks somewhere in a courier van somewhere. Well, it'll be fine, but we're just going to use this as a height reference and then we'll worry about that later on. So there'll be at least 3 of the 4 edges of the floor bolted in. Even though it would be the simplest time right now to do repairs to the storage bins, these bits right here, I haven't done them. So I don't want to accidentally make the repairs stick out too far and then we can't weld the floor on properly. So it's better us getting the floor in and then fixing those to the floor after we know how long they're supposed to be.
We're going to slowly adjust the rotary jig to make the most of the lateral aura that speaks to our inner child. And then we're going to double check that the rear mirrors work, which apparently they do. Thank you very much. And we're going to start by cutting these holes that are for the plug welds at the back of the heel board of the car. So we need to drill a bunch of holes so we can put a load of molten metal into there via electricity using a welding thing. This is the floor. That's what it's called. And we have to drill a bunch of holes at the front as well because we're going to put a bunch of molten metal into the front as well, which is going to stick the whole thing together. And then don't forget to drill a bunch of holes on the side as well.
Now, initially, I was going to turn the Mini upside down and put this on the top of it so I could like wiggle it around. But then I remembered we've got the really long bolts that go on the rollover jig that we can lower the car onto it. And that's what we're going to do now. So time to floor it. Very bad pun. We're going to do it. Let's go.
If you remember in part 2, we've got these threaded rods that help us load and unload the Mini from the rotary jig. We're going to use these to lower the Mini onto the floor. So let's give it a go. So as you can see, slowly bringing it down, just making sure I'm not going to mess up, and then slowly adjusting and making sure it's in the right spot. So this took a little bit of a while because you want it to be in the right place. I've lifted the Mini up onto the toe board lip and then in order to kick it right to the front of the car. Yeah, this was a bit of a wrestle because it wasn't quite fitting. It needed a lot of force to get it right up to the front of the Mini. So I tried the hammer, I tried the feet, I tried everything.
That, my friends, was an absolute nightmare. It took me a little while to figure out the best method of getting it to work. Basically, it needed to go about 5mm towards the front, and it just wouldn't move. So what I've done is I've ratchet strapped from the handbrake mount over to the front of the jig to basically pull it that extra 5mm. Now it's all matching up to exactly where it needs to be. I've beaten it all into shape, and yeah, it is now ready to add a few welds here and there and then lift it up, and hopefully it all matches up and whatnot.
I then used the electric sparky stick to put some molten metal into some of the holes, and then used the multi-tool to make sure the metal laid flush to each of them so there wasn't space in between. As you can see, this was a little bit of a laborious task because you have to make sure it's just right and you're not soldering like all into the wind. It was at this point where I realised that the frame, I really overdid it because I couldn't get to all of the places sufficiently, but it worked enough for us to be able to lift it up, and the floor came with it, which if you're not aware, that is good news. The floor is supposed to go with the car. But then it was a little bit of a task to remove the frame. Yeah, there was so much of it. I don't remember putting that much in, but yeah, there was bits going here, bits going there. It was just I was Isambard Brunel building a really big fancy bridge, but the only difference is I had to remove it at the end of the day. And now with all of that excess metal out of the way, we can finish off the welds, grind down to the tops to a fine finish, and work on the outer sills. It was a little bit of a time-consuming thing to make sure all of these lined up perfectly to the doorsteps, but with a little bit of time and a little bit of persistence, they all lined up perfectly together, and then we had to grind them down to an inch of their life. And then before any professional welders came in and had a closer look, we covered it all in anti-corrosive primer, not corrosive primer, that wouldn't be bad. I also added plug welds to the bottom of it as well, which might be a bit over the top, but I felt like doing it anyway, and also some to the outside, the back of the heel board, just because why not? Let's do it anyway. Look at that. It's got a floor, and you can't see my legs. I'm stood there, and you could see my torso, but not my legs. So we're going to add some seam sealer. This is the stuff that stops water getting in. If it was in a heavy rain situation and there was none of this on there, it will kind of seep in and then get into the cockpit and make your carpets wet if you've got carpets in there or anything like that. It's going to get painted over, so we're going to squidge it down, make sure it all pushes in. We're going to do it on the inside as well because they had it on the inside originally as well, so I figured let's do it to all of them. Let's make them all look lovely. And then we're going to tackle this bit of hole, which I was procrastinating sufficiently for the last week or so on because I was like, oh, it's a little bit difficult to do. But as you can see, with a bit of a Sharpie and a bit of a fiff and a faff and a bit of a bend here and a bend there, I managed to get a bit of a panel that sort of reminisces of what was supposed to be there. And we're going to weld it in. We're going to use the multi-tool at the front of the back. And this is, yes, the eagle eyes amongst you, this is just a normal DIY hammer. I still need to get one of those fancy metalwork hammers, but it does the job. It does the job because remember, a bit of grinder and a bit of paint makes you the welder and the hammerer. You wait. I think that's the word. Anyway, we're going to drill the hole a little bit more again, give it a nice thick coat of anti-corrosive primer, ready for the paint on the top. Anyway, we're going to also replace this bit of A-pillar, I think it would be called, because the seam is too rusty, and we need that seam to be able to put all the panels on the front in the next video when we put the Mini's face back on. So we're going to pull it all off because I found that the replacement panel's metal was thicker, so I decided to do the whole shebang. So we pull that out, have a closer look at some of the other welds that I did on the other side. Looks all right. Figure out the orientation of this, and then yeah, give a bit of spray paint on the inside of weld over primer and double check that the panels that we're going to be putting onto this on the front actually fit well and work the way they're supposed to, and then zing 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 away with the magic stick of doom. It's always a rinse and repeat situation with all of these panels. You've got to grind the plug welds down after you've welded them. You're going to get the idea, right? Guess what the next video is about? Yeah, it's about that. So yeah, a bit more primer on the top, and we've got another panel we can tick off the to-do list. Wait, is that a ding-ding-a-ling at the door? Yes, it is that missing panel that I was waiting for the courier to deliver for the last 2 weeks. We can finally put this repair panel on. We're going to do the same as we did on the other side, which was in part 1, and replicate the seam that was originally on the Mini and not on this repaired panel. So we're going to cut it in half at this point where I'm drawing the Sharpie. So we're going to snip that away. We're going to use less of the panel on this side because it is a lot less rusty. So I cut it where the different greens intersected to make the weld a little bit less noticeable, because I'm not using filler in this whole project because filler is lame. So we're going to cut off the rusty bits, and I'm going to try my hardest hardest to save that tiny bit of B pillar underneath. You can see that tiny bit of metal there. That's going to stay because that's another panel on the back, and we're going to size it up and we're going to weld it down. For some reason, I lost parts of when I was doing this front part of the doorstep, so we're jumping straight over to welding it, but we're going to weld that to this side because, hello, we've got the floor in there now, so we can weld it straight to the inner sill. So after welding the back replacement panel, we can use this new tool that I picked up. It's a tiny little bandsaw, which means we can do finer grinds and then, weld the doorstep also to the outer sill on this side. Because this concludes all of the floor repairs, we're going to spray it with some of this stone chip stuff that I've had on the shelf for ages. I can't remember where, but I saw it on a YouTube video and I fell for it, and I bought 3 cans, but then I didn't use it for the car that I was planning to use it, so we're going to use it here, so hopefully it's good. Dynatrol 455, I think it's called. Anyway, I tried it in the wheel arch. I was only going to do it in the wheel arch, but it dried to such a lovely finish, I decided, screw it, let's use all 3 of the cans and just spray the whole bottom of it. I was going to do it the colour of the actual car, but I realised it's a very time-consuming and expensive project for something that people are only ever going to see if I end up flipping the car, which hopefully never happens. So let's just paint it black because it really doesn't matter. And also, this is the same colour as undercoat, and we're going to go for the patina look that makes it look like it hasn't had any work done to it. So technically, this is it. It looks like underseal, but with class. Think of it like gentrified underseal, you know, like where all the poshies move in, and they want it to look rough still, but they want it to be proper. That's basically what this floor looks like. I also added this other stuff that was from Dynatrol that I bought at the same time and never used. It's this waxy stuff, wax cavity malarkey. Gonna spray it in all the cavities and forget about it. As you can see, it's oozing from within.
So it's now got a stone chip on it, and yeah, it's a bit of a shame it's black, isn't it? There's a childhood want inside of me that it wants to be green on the underside, even though nobody can see it. It's always been a dream of mine to have a car that is the same colour on the bottom that it is on the top, because every car that I've ever had has always turned up with underseal, coated all over, probably covering them years of nasty rust and stuff. So I really want to paint on top of the stone chip, but it just adds another couple of days of faffing, and ultimately I want to get this thing on the road. So I might, this is the question, what do you reckon? Paint the whole thing, do the primer, do the paint, or do the primer and do the paint on just the bits that are visible, i.e. the outer sills, the wheel arches, this stuff, and then we can actually leave the bottom of it black and get on with the rest of it and worry about that stuff later on. Ooh, it's a tough choice. Anyway, that's it for this week's video. That was a lot of work. In the next video, we should hopefully finish off the bodywork by shoving its face back on. I'm already quite a way through that, and I've already shot a bunch of stuff, and it's all up on Patreon, because Patreon is the thing that supports this stuff, and I wouldn't be able to do it at such a pace if it wasn't for that. So thank you very much for the support. Anyway, until next time, I'm Luke Man, no computer. This is the big bogey. Well, it's the big bit of charcoal at the minute on the bottom. And if you like what you see, don't forget to subscribe, and yeah, don't be scared to try it.
Rustios, 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 Minios, Rusty A.